John is well known to the Chamber and is a silver partner of Glasgow Chamber of Commerce, and we're delighted to have John as a member and presenting today. John was previously a BBC news correspondent, and then he was the BBC's chief political correspondent at Scottish Parliament, at Westminster and at Brussels, so extensive experience. And of course, Morrison Media is now one of the country's most highly respected PR, public affairs and media training businesses. John has a vast experience of providing advice and training at board level with some of the biggest brand names in the world, including companies like BP, CGI, Scottish Police Federation, SSE and Scottish Water. So without further ado, I'll hand over to John, who wants to make his presentation, and then we can have questions and answers later. So over to you, John.
Thank you very much, Richard. And let me first of all just share my screen here. So we can, is it all there? Yeah. Excellent. Okay then. Well, so where are we now, I suppose, is the first question. And what I'm going to do is I'll take you through a brief introduction, internal communications, because that is very different. A lot of us, in fact, most of us have been working from home for the last 5 or 6 months, and internal communications has been even more important than it normally is. External communications, how you're talking to your customers, and then I think that we're often asked about is crisis communications. How do you deal with when things go wrong? And for a lot of us, a lot of things are going wrong at the moment, a lot of them out of our own control. And then, as Richard said, we'll move to Q&A after that, and you can ask me basically any question you want. I'm not guaranteeing I'll be able to answer them, but I'll have a go. Okay, so where are we now? Well, I suppose we can start by saying congratulations. If you are here, that means you're still in business and you're still interested in telling your story, both internally and externally. We've been through what you would call a pandemic. I'm going to try and not use the word unprecedented, but you know what I mean. We've never seen the likes of this before. It's caused a public health crisis, and everyone expects that to be followed by an economic crisis. And that looks as if it's coming closer to us over the last 6 months. You and your people and the teams around you, you've had a huge amount of information to deal with. Often conflicting information, some of it's true, some of it isn't. And these conflicting theories as to, you know, the latest one just now is, should we be wearing masks? The science is quite weak on it, but these conflicting theories add to the confusion. And what that leads to is there's a lot of fear in the world, and the same is true of the business world. If you remember back to the beginning, at the very beginning, everyone was terrified of catching this virus. They were terrified then about their mental health because this became an issue. They were concerned about vulnerable family members. But now, as the virus has subsided, the attention is beginning to turn to the economy, jobs, and ourselves. You know, what is the state of our companies? So if we look back through this pandemic, there have been winners and losers. And in this instance, we're looking at communication. It's been very interesting to watch over the recent months how well-known brands have been dealing with their messaging and communications. There's clear winners and losers. For those of you who love IKEA, maybe you haven't been in there for months, or maybe you were in that massive queue that was there only a few weeks ago. They did really well. They issued a free flat pack with instructions on how to make their famous Swedish meatballs. Now, I think that was brilliant. It was a bit of fun. It made the brand just friendly and made people smile, which is really important. The other guys who've done well, as usual, they've got a very, very sophisticated PR machine, was Brewdog. And I know the talk is we've all been drinking too much at home, but hey, you know, you've got to get through a pandemic somehow. And if they were amongst the first to switch to making a sanitizer, which they called brew gel. But it's been interesting that distilleries and brewers, the length and breadth of the country, have been getting in on this and helping locally. And I'll come back to that in a while. But I liked the new beer that Brewdog brought out when there was a certain political advisor in the news, the Barnard Castle Eye Test, which I just thought was brilliant, irreverent, funny, and it appeals to their mainly young customer base. The other ones doing very well, National Geographic. They have given free access to all their COVID-19 stories around the world, which is a really good thing to do when people are concerned. Now, the ones who didn't do so well, Tim Martin at Wetherspoon was an early loser, sacking his staff and telling them to get jobs at Tesco. He got a real kicking on social media, and it'll be interesting to see what happens when his doors open for real again. Spurs Football Club, they tried to furlough all their staff, you know, from ground attendants to grounds people, while the chairman picked up a £3 million bonus, and you had footballers continuing to earn hundreds of thousands of pounds a month. That went down really badly. And the other one who is still struggling, I see, Richard Branson, billionaire looking for a bailout for Virgin Airlines. Double whammy for him because he suffered personally, and the Virgin brand has also suffered. Now, I heard a good line recently. I really liked it. So as you do with flattering the people that come up with lines like that, imitation. Leaders, brands, and reputations are like tea bags. You don't know how strong they are until they get into hot water. So one of the things is, when should you communicate with your team? Now, you know, most of us are now beginning to think about potentially going back into our offices, but who knows? You know, we saw the situation in Aberdeen a few weeks ago. Things can lock down very quickly again. And as people involved in business, communication within teams, you know, it's a challenge. Good leaders generally know when and how to communicate with your staff. They'll also know that people are different. Some will look for information and advice earlier than others. Some people just want to keep their heads down and basically get on with their jobs. But when people are frightened, you should be aware in the teams around you, in the teams that you're leading, that sometimes when people are frightened, they can often react badly. Just look at social media. It gets more and more intense as this pandemic is going on. Rumours grow wings. Fears about health and jobs grow a life of their own. So it's really vital you keep informing your teams about what's happening to the staff, to the company, to your clients. If you don't do that, a vacuum is created which is filled with rumour, lies, and poison. So clearly you need to avoid this. So if I go back to the question on your screens, when should you communicate with your team? The answer is early and often. Good brands also remember their people, you know, things like Zoom drinks, Zoom quizzes. I've even heard of Zoom dancing, which at Morrison Media we have avoided, but I know some people are doing it. And it's all about just making people feel you are part of a team. And even although we're not seeing each other, we're not touching each other or sharing a coffee, we're still in this together. So the rules for communicating effectively, well, they remain the same, but amidst all the noise around COVID and every other kind of scandal that appears, the messages need to be amplified. When the world is awash with rumour and counter-rumour, the good news is that rules for communicating effectively, they remain the same, but as I'm saying, you do have to make sure that you are amplifying your message. If you're getting good feedback on your messaging in normal times, keep doing the same thing. But if you do begin to hear groundswell of, muttering and moaning and nothing's clear and you're not communicating often enough, it's not failing to ask for advice. Lots of company leaders, they're fantastic legal brains, financial brains. Sometimes their communication skills just need a bit of help from people who do communications for a living, and bring in professionals to help and to advise you on what they're doing. And remember that when you're talking to your teams, you are competing for the attention of your teams with lots of other information: radio, TV, mainstream media, social media. The world is awash with information. Some more good news, though, that research shows that people trust the information they receive from their own companies more than they trust most other sources, including the government, particularly social media, and even the mainstream media. So this is really important for companies not to abuse this trust, because your workforce, your teams, normally they will trust you. You need to build on that trust, give facts, tell the truth, tell it often, be humane, be kind to people. And remember that COVID has increased a renewed sense of community. That thing I was saying about the sanitizers, companies all over Scotland are doing this, and in many cases where they can, providing it free to their communities. Even the supermarkets, Morrison supermarket recognised this. They gave away £10 million worth of food to food banks, probably more now, and I looked this up. So companies that can are doing what they can in their locality. So in terms of messaging, keep your messages simple, keep them short, and keep repeating them. What does effective messages look like? Well, to avoid confusion, try to be impossible to be misunderstood. So you keep simple, as I'm saying, short, repeat them. If you remember back to the beginning of lockdown, how simple the government messaging was. It was stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives. Really simple, really straightforward. But then the UK government were first to move, and they changed the messaging to stay alert, stay safe. Now, that means different things to different people, which is why a bit of confusion came in. And it's well known that when people are stressed, fearful, and under pressure, they absorb less information, and they very often pick up things wrongly. So make sure your messaging is clear, consistent, and concise. And important messages should be repeated again and again. It's also vitally important to show kindness, understanding, and empathy. The language of communications hasn't changed during COVID-19. However, empathy, care, mental health, trust, honesty, transparency have all become watchwords. And I suppose the question is, in a cynical world, will this continue? I think that is likely to in the short to medium term. But I think the impact of people beginning to lose jobs will begin to erode that. We know that a lot of people are struggling, and we also know that that struggle is not likely to end anytime soon. So as we move into the next stages of COVID-19, the uncertainty in people's lives looks set to increase rather than decrease. So as we slowly emerge from the bunker, blinking, I was going to say into the summer sun, but there's not much of that today, but all of us are asking, what does the world of business look like? Most companies, big and small, have similar questions looming as they consider a return to work. Can we continue to furlough or not? What comes after furlough? That word redundancies is beginning to increasingly appear in the news. Should we go back to the office or not? And I've read some fantastic arguments on both sides of this. Where do we stand with old clients? Have we kept in touch with them? And what about new business? So all of these have an impact on communications, and all of them need a clear strategy and a clear message. And when you're doing your messaging, apply what we call the what, why, when, where questions. Because if you ask yourself, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? When am I going to do it? Where are we going to do this? This helps you unclutter your thinking and very often helps you get to the nub of the issue. Simple questions very often just cut through the fog. And transparency and honesty is really important at this stage. So as furlough payments begin to taper off, which will be happening soon, what now? Questions, again, more questions. Do you need to reduce the size of the team? Do you need to have everyone back in the office? How will people get to work? Huge question, because you can make your office safe, but that journey, that bit between the home and the office, how do people get there? And some of the workers will be keen to return, some will be extremely fearful. Have you contacted old clients? Do you know if they're still in business? Do they know that you're still in business? And then that question of, we all talk about pipeline when we're looking at the way out of anything. We need a pipeline of new contracts, new work, new clients. But does that exist anymore? How do you create it in this new world? So today, what we're looking at, the essence of what I'm talking about is how you communicate your plan. So in a world riddled with uncertainty, very often when you are involved with either leading a team or being in charge of the communications, the staff will look to you for certainty. They look to you to bring clarity out of chaos. And it's really important for leaders to lead and to have a vision for the future. Be as honest and transparent as possible. Tell staff the reality. The likelihood is they probably know it anyway, that you're just confirming what they fear is happening. If tough decisions have to be made on redundancies, you should call them early. Be decisive, communicate your decisions and reasoning quickly. Remember, the reputation of your company depends on how you navigate your way out of a desperate situation few people saw coming and no one could prevent. Bottom line in all of this, though, if tough decisions are being made, be kind, be empathetic, think people. Another great phrase I heard recently is that you don't know who's swimming naked until the tide goes out. So, public relations, what's that about? That's about telling stories. That's what we do for companies, and companies, we help them, but very often what we're helping them do is get to grips with their own story. And as you struggle with the full impact of COVID-19, it's obliterated some companies already. Some continue to be threatened, and it's probably fair to say that PR might be the last thing on your mind. So you're thinking staff, you're thinking cash flow, you're thinking clients. That's the focus for most people. But that will change. And as people are going back to work, you should be planning how best to tell your own story. Right now, COVID's impacting on every aspect of your lives. And as you hear many people be saying, things will never be the same again. I think that's maybe true, but business has to be prepared for uncertainty, because you often hear people saying certainty. Business always looks for certainty. Well, that ship has well and truly sailed. We're sailing into, to use another overextend a maritime image, we really are in uncharted waters. So you should be ready to tell your story, and that should be based around your business plan. So you have a business plan. Where are we now? How do we move forward? And you should create your story around that. When you're starting a new PR and communications plan, which is something I would advise most companies to do, because the story you had 6 months ago is highly unlikely to be the story you're going to be telling now. So you have to sit down, whether you're leading the team, whether you're the MD or director comms, or you're in charge of a section yourselves, where are you now? And then you're looking at what kind of shape are your communications in. Did you close down in March and enter a black hole with little or no communication? Or have you been vocal throughout? Have you been talking to people? It's time to evaluate exactly where you are and to be honest about it. It's important to know where you are so that you know where to start communicating your way out of the bunker. And it's also important at this stage, as we're all beginning to say, right, we're still here, we still have a story to tell, but don't forget that you also have to scenario plan for even more bad stuff could happen. You know, we've seen in Aberdeen in recent days, we're seeing in Cooper Fife, we're seeing Leicester, Oldham, and we're seeing it around the world that this virus is a nasty, nasty virus that can come back. And so we should also, as well as preparing the way forward, we should be prepared what happens if we get an outbreak at one of our facilities, like happened in Cooper Angus. What happens if an important client goes down? All that should be scenario planned for in normal times. In these extraordinary times, you should be doing this as well. So for those of you that had a comms plan for summer, autumn, winter 2020, you will have to revise it. For those of you that didn't have a plan, it's time to start one. What do you want to say? Who do you want to talk to? Where's the best place to say it? You may have noticed that newspapers in particular have had a very bad pandemic. Sales have plummeted in what was an already depressed market, but ironically, people are consuming more news, most of it online. For a long time, even news agents were closed and people weren't going out. And if they were going out, they were exercising, not going out to buy newspapers. So the way to think, if you're thinking about your own company story, is not to think of newspapers in the traditional way. The Herald, Scotsman, Courier, P&J, they're all now digital platforms and they all have space to fill. Radio, TV, also looking, they're really keen on stories of recovery. And you should also look at social media. This is where to tell your own stories, because if you can't get the media, the mainstream media interested in your story, you can tell your own story. And you've got LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Work out, you shouldn't do them all. Try and work out which suits your audience best and build up an audience. So if you take these basic steps, you're now almost ready for your relaunch. So remember that: review, revise, relaunch. So now what you should be doing is preparing your key messages. What's your message to your market? Does your previous market exist? Has it moved online? And once you're kind of finding the answer to these questions, you have to make sure that you create the right messages for the right channels. Make sure your messages are aligned across your marketing, your social media, your PR, so that what you're saying on one platform is amplified and repeated on others. Remind people you're still here and that you're open for business. What are you known for? Remind people who were your customers. Have you been doing anything incredible in your community during the last 5-6 months? You know, tell people their stories, because people do want this sense of community, this sense of locality is going to be really important. Then you should have, by now, once you've worked on your key messages, you should have a clear vision and story for how the business, staff, and your customers are going to emerge from the crisis. You should also assess your team. Are the comms and marketing team, are they fully engaged? Are they ready to take on this new situation? How have they responded to isolation? And make sure as a company that you're telling your story and that you're including your marketing and comms team early in your planning, and make sure that they're enthusiastic and on the same page as the senior management team, ready to communicate with customers to take you through the economic impact of COVID-19. Now, if you do all of this, you have a better chance of getting your story right, you have a better chance of getting it to the right people, and you have a better chance that your brand new offering will be welcomed in the market. Now, as we know, things can go wrong at the best of times. And, you know, if we have the best of times, these are possibly the worst of times. I think, you know, I'm fed up of reading the number of people saying this is the worst thing for 100 years. Even some people go even further. Now, normally, up until March, I used to say that crisis communications was a much overused phrase. Day-to-day issues and events that are part of the rough and tumble of business life are rarely a crisis. They're just things that you have to deal with. For me, a crisis is a situation that threatens to engulf your entire organization and destroy it. And as we know, COVID-19 is unlike anything we've ever seen before. It's rocked even the best companies to their foundations. Good companies have gone under, and sadly, more will follow. But you, with good planning and some luck, can get through this. So what I'll do now is just to close off, I'll finish off with just fairly quickly going through how to put together a crisis communications plan. So this should be sitting alongside your PR thing. And I start again with crisis communications. You should make a plan. Preparation is everything. If you already have a crisis plan, that's really good. If not, create one immediately. Assemble a team to look at all your possible COVID-related issues. And as I was saying, don't rule anything out. Make sure the team know all about the organization. This team that's putting together the crisis plan, make sure they know everything about the company. And this thing of, I don't think that would happen here. How often have I heard that from people as something they didn't think would happen here suddenly lands on their heads. You should, in advance, you should prepare holding statements. Now, these are simply holding statements. They are just so that you've got the comfort of, we have thought through situations, and these holding statements, they can be used both for the mainstream media and social media. And what holding statements do is it'll buy you time to get a grip of what's going on and to collect the facts. So you should also identify a person. This is all part of the planning. Identify a person who'll handle media calls and a media spokesperson, making sure they've been media trained. And the media spokesperson should not be the person who's handling the overall COVID situation, the COVID response. The person handling that will have enough on their plate. They shouldn't be dealing with the comms, because one or other will suffer. And brief all your staff, particularly the ones that answer the phone, that they direct inquiries to that person who is identified. And remember, journalists are very, very good. They're professionals even at wheedling information out of people. And if something bad does happen, first, most important thing is don't panic. Stay calm, be flexible, expect the unexpected. If you have a plan, good. Get your team in place and make sure there's a strong line of communication from the team that's dealing with the crisis to the overall management. Something happens bad, first thing you have to do is find the facts, because when something bad happens, all you've got to look at is Twitter or Facebook, the amount of misinformation that immediately flows out. Now, the fact that the news used to happen more slowly and is now instant, and that reaction is instant, sometimes before the people involved have actually found out what's happening, that doesn't change what you should do. You have to find the facts, because if you don't know the facts yourself, how can you possibly tell your story? And you get to the facts quickly and check them. watch out for any misinformation coming out from your company. And remember the old phrase that a lie is halfway around the world before the truth has got its shoes on. That's why a plan is important. And if a lie was fast then, imagine how fast it is now. Take control. So you go back to your plan, get a hold of the holding statement and flesh it out now with what you know for sure. That doesn't mean that you spill your guts out to the media. You don't. It's controlled. You take all the facts and you get a proper, strong statement together. Stick to the facts and use positive language where possible. What do I mean by that? So instead of saying, we're trying to find out, you say, we've launched an immediate investigation. Why do you do that? Because that makes you sound more dynamic and on top of things. And plan, as you see the scale of the media interest, if you're in a big company that things have gone very publicly wrong, there will be far more interest in you. So you have to start planning your statements. When did they go out? And make sure your media spokesperson is constantly briefed and updated so that they're on top. Never ever give way to speculation or agree to answering questions that are speculative. Deal only in facts. Really important that you don't let events overtake you. Don't let the media set the agenda. They love setting the agenda, and every story tends to follow a similar pattern. So if you've got your own comms people, talk to them about where does this go, or if you're hiring in comms advisors, they should be able to tell you with a degree of certainty, this is how the lifespan of the story will go. Now, if you're overwhelmed by an event, put a statement up on your website, and that means that you can direct to it because everybody goes straight to companies' websites now. And don't react until you're ready, because you're already in a bad situation. Let's get to the bottom and let's start climbing out of it rather than making it worse by reacting too quickly. And keep up to date with the media requests. Try and anticipate what they're going to be looking for, and essentially through a crisis, stay on the front foot. Remember as well, crises do come to an end. When you're involved in one, sometimes it doesn't feel like this will come to an end, but it will pass. This too shall pass. And after that, if the company is sensible, it sits down and it takes stock again. You face the future because, COVID will have consequences for every company and business. Something else comes along, it will too. And you have to assess the reputational damage, plan your comeback, tell your story, and remember that you're rarely judged on what goes wrong, but always on how you react to it. And then the final thing is review your crisis plan. If you had a good plan going in, how did it stand up to the sort of scrutiny you get from the media? Were there bits that worked really well? Were there bits that need tweaked? Just do this and candidly go through this again. And, remember that questioning your boss in a situation like this, that is a good thing for a company. And my final slide is the beware the court of public opinion, which has been in overdrive in the last 6 months. Because COVID-19 means that companies and businesses are faced with making extremely tough economic decisions that will have a huge impact on their staff, the people they employ, as they struggle to come to terms with the fact that income and cash flow are massively reduced and in some cases have dried up completely. But the dangers for the business community extends far beyond the bottom line. Every bad decision you make faces being tried by the court of public opinion. And this court, in this court, the public are the judge, jury, and executioner. So think Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. They can convene at any time of day or night. And you've seen even recently, one of these, Facebook, was faced with a massive problem because of the court of public opinion, many big brands removing their advertising. And who was driving that? That was the public that used Facebook to drive. It's just ever diminishing circles. And everyone in the world understands that businesses are facing, or many businesses are staring into the financial abyss. It's not an easy time for anyone, but approaching difficult decisions with humanity and sensitivity is surely the way to go. So think human, think community, because there's little point in overcoming COVID-19 to find that you've been tried and damned in the court of public opinion. So you may have survived, but your hard-earned reputation hasn't, which means that it's a long way back as you're communicating out of a pandemic. Okay, guys, that's my, I'll just stop the sharing here, or I'll show you my own wee photo and my name and address, so I can share this with you as well if you wish. So I'm very happy through Richard, I think you're going to chair this, is to take questions.
There we go. Unmuted. Thank you so much, John. That was brilliant. So many nuggets in there, and I'm sure our attendees will have questions. I know I've got quite a few in there as well. Fascinating to hear about the winners and the losers, making sure that you've got your facts. I must try a pint or a bottle of that Barnard Castle eye test. That sounds well worth trying out. I wonder what that's all about. Have a plan, take control, stay on the front foot. I love the tea bag analogy. I've made a note of that, and I'll make sure I keep that one for future use. Of course, the importance of keeping it simple as well, which all marketeers should know, and keeping the clarity out of the chaos. And of course, thinking about people, and particularly in such challenging times, and the appetite for stories of recovery, which we know all too well at the Chamber with our various campaigns, including our inspiring Glasgow and inspiring city stories. So lots of questions, I'm sure. I'm going to say to all of our guests today, if you've got questions, please put them on the chat function, or hover on participants and you can raise a hand if you'd like to raise a question, and we'll unmute you. Or if we can see you visually, just raise an old-fashioned physical hand and we can ask your question as well. We put you on. I'll get the ball rolling. As I said, I've got quite a few questions. It's almost not knowing quite where to start, really. But I think probably we had been advised in the early days at the Chamber of over-communication, John. I know it's a very simple thing to say, but do you want to just quickly share your thoughts on over-communication, and particularly, I think you talked a lot about honesty and transparency, integrity, and we have tried and endeavoured to over-communicate, whether it's been through chief executive messages regularly to members, whether it's been through a weekly conference call with what we call our Glasgow Business Resilience Council, whether it's actually been chief executive webinars where, you know, Stuart's appeared most weekly to speak to members. So Gillian Doherty from Data Lab gave us that advice, and we really kind of cherished that and went with it. What's your view on over communicating? Is that too simple a phrase?
I don't think it is, because I think what you have to say is, what people have to think is that if you're leading a team, or you're the chief executive of the Chamber or the MD, thinking, what do I know? And if I didn't know this myself, this high level information I'm getting, would I want to know it? And it's, as I said earlier on, some people react, or all people react in different ways. Some people want to soak up information and want to know everything, and other people want to do just the headline stuff. You know, what is it? But so you can actually do it like that. So you can give a short email and then click in here for for more information if you want to drill into it. But what you're actually doing in communicating with people is that you are concerned about them, that you're keen to share the story, whether it's a good story or a bad story, and that you are here to help people. And I think it's about that humanity and that kindness, that empathy and that understanding, because you talk to people, everybody has their own concerns, whether it's elderly parents, or they may be shielding themselves, or they have a partner, or kids who are shielding, or you don't know the difficulties behind the scenes. So just telling people, you're here, we're here to help, and here, this is what's happening.
And what do you say, John, to people, because it's such a difficult and such a sensitive time for people, where do companies and individuals lie when they have a genuine success story to talk about and to tell a story, but they maybe feel it's difficult with so many other companies and businesses struggling, and they don't want to be seen to be, projecting themselves like that when they would stick out from the crowd and maybe feel a bit bad about doing that? What's your reaction to that? What do you say to that?
It's a really interesting one, because we have clients who have done well because they have been providing services that people require. But the thing is that in the best of times, people don't like people boasting, but they do like to hear positive stories. So again, I think it's all about the tone and the register and how you do the story, so that it's not, look at us, we're fantastic, look at what we're doing, but just do it in a way, that tells your story, that reminds people actually, because very often what you're doing is, if there's been a success story, like for example, the IT world, a lot of companies that are involved in IT connectivity, that sort of thing. For example, this thing we're on right now, Zoom, they have an extraordinary story to tell, because their graph is just like that. But actually, they haven't spent that much time telling that story because it's out there. So you have to do your success stories, I think you have to do with great sensitivity, because people don't like boasters at the best of times, and particularly when everybody else is being pummeled. And think back of how, no company goes out saying, we've absolutely hammered the opposition to win this contract. In the best of times, they say, we're delighted that we've won this. And I think that's the way to do it. Just watch the language.
Okay. Thanks, John. So we've got a couple of questions coming in now. Actually, might just invite the guys just to ask the question in person. So Sarah, can we unmute Sarah for the, was it Sarah or was it Vary? It's Vary. Vary, can we unmute Vary, Lisa, and she can ask a question, just rather than me?
Yeah, sorry, clearly I'm not Sarah. I have that.
Thanks, Vary.
Sarah shared a link with me because I didn't get mine. Yeah, I was just interested, John, in how you think the media landscape is going to change sort of permanently as we come out of the COVID crisis, and is there a danger of us consuming news only on social media, so you can end up in a bit of an echo chamber, hearing just what you want to hear and potentially not as many facts?
Yeah, I think that it was a danger before COVID, and it'll be a danger after COVID, because people tend to like or follow the people that they like. And I don't think that's a good thing. I think you should have always try to have a range of opinion, so that you hear the left wing, the right wing, the middle wing, whatever it is, just so you get a range, because that gives you a range of opinion. And I, for example, read The Spectator, which a lot of my friends find very, very interesting, but I would probably disagree with most of the opinion in The Spectator, but I still enjoy reading it because it's well written, and it makes me think about what I'm thinking, my own views. I think TV and television news will continue to probably dominate. Newspapers have had a hard time, but they're still moving online. The big challenge for them is that so few of them with, I'm just thinking in the UK, probably really the Financial Times is the only one that's really made a success of the paywall. The Times newspapers are doing it. I'm not quite sure where their circulation is, but in times like this, if you're not buying newspapers normally, you probably aren't buying them during COVID, and you certainly aren't buying them during lockdown because you couldn't get out. So to answer your question, I think there will be a realignment. I don't think it's clear yet which direction it's going to go, but I do know you've just got to look at, for example, the Reach, which owns the Daily Record, Sunday Mail, and lots of other regional newspapers across the UK. They're paying off, I think it was 500 mainly journalists. That's not a good thing to see, because and what that then means is that people retreat into their own bubble and only hear what they want to hear, and that is never a good thing.
Thanks for the question, Bernie. Thanks, John. Claire is asking about, do you have tips or experience examples you can share on companies with remote workforces for communicating, not all online, crisis and timings, what works and what doesn't? And if Claire, if I haven't done that justice, feel free to come on and add if you like. But yeah, tips and experience, John, on companies with remote workforces.
Well, I think we've all got remote workforces, haven't we? Certainly, most of the clients that we have remote workforces, and I'm regularly doing conference calls with companies that have, there'll be 2 people on from Glasgow, and what we're realizing is that nobody has been in the office. And I think this is likely to continue for a while. Now, I think when I talk to people about it, what it means is that they're able to do business as, I could say business as normal. It's not business as normal, but they're able to get through the processes of what they need to do. So if you're the finance team, you're able to kind of provide the accounts. If you're the comms team telling the story, you can still collect the information. I think Zoom and Teams have really enhanced things, because we've got clients who are across the UK, and very often we don't see them because they do telephone calls. But now with Zoom and Teams, we not only see them, we see the inside of their houses, so there's a wee bit of recognition factor there. But I think what most people feel is that, no, the technology has been wonderful and has helped us all stay together, but what you lack is, or lose, is this team dynamic. And I think pretty much everybody I talk to says that they lose that because, for example, my wife's a scientist, and she's a geneticist, and she works in labs, and if they're confronted by something new or whatever, they can very quickly turn to each other and say, have you seen this, or have you seen anything like this before? And you can just have an instant conference, whereas on Teams or Zoom, you'd have to set it up, and you're trying to, so then you end up kind of trying to sort things out for yourselves. That's probably not the best way, because kind of team sharing has probably been reduced despite the technology. So I think that's it. Technology has kept us together. Technology has allowed us to do our work to a certain level, but there are things that are missing. And I think the thing that has been most missing is the team dynamic, and just basically the banter and that whole thing of the morning coffee or the beer after work that kind of creates teams and helps create teams.
Mm-hmm. And do you see there being any more, challenges as some businesses now begin to return, or businesses have some people returning but some not? Is the communicating going to be any different, do you think?
I think it's going to be, again, we're into a new territory, because, some people, I think, want to go back to work. Some people don't want to go back to work. Some people can't go back to work because they feel that, if they have a serious condition which could be threatened by, although, for example, in this house, we've got experience of shielding because of my wife had a kidney transplant. She still has to be just as cared for now as she was 2 months ago, because this killer virus has not gone away. So therefore, that will affect her for months until there's a vaccine. So each individual is going to react to this in a different way. The skill for companies is that you accept that and you appreciate it, and that you listen to people and try and plot a way out of it. Now, just because somebody says, listen, I'm nervous about coming to work, doesn't mean that they are not as committed as everybody else. It's just that their life comes first. So I think it's going to be really tricky, really complex for companies, and you cannot. I run a company. I wouldn't feel comfortable about saying to people, "You must come back." We'll all work out our way. And also, I think work in terms of there are companies that are having people starting at 7 in the morning, finishing earlier so that they're missing the rush hour. There's a lot of that happening, but I know some very big companies in London have told their staff not to return to work till next year.
Yeah.
But other companies are, a lot of them are already back.
Yeah.
And just to finish on that, there was a friend of mine, a woman called Dr. Jacqueline Conway. If you look, she's written on social media in the last couple of days a thing that working from home, that the kind of perceived wisdom is that this is a good thing. Now, she's saying, yes, it works for you, but actually what she is saying is it really as good as it's cracked out to be, or have we made it good because it's actually allowed us to carry on working and carry on earning a wage? But remember, most of us are social human beings. We like and enjoy the company of other people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I enjoyed a little interview last night on the TV with very young kids just going to primary school for the first time in Northern Ireland, and one of the wee girls was asked, had she, how had she enjoyed Zoom, and how was she looking forward to go back to school? And she beamed that she was going back to school because she could meet other kids and and play with them and all the rest of it. And Zoom was useless.
Yeah.
Not the same thing for businesses, but it was just seeing that delight on the children's faces. So that was quite nice. So we've got time for a couple more quick questions. If anybody would like to raise their hands before we finish up. We've got one in from Seren. As companies move to a more blended approach with some people working remotely and some people working in the office, how can business leaders make sure they communicate effectively to all staff?
Yeah, it's going to be challenging because probably, if you think about it, if you just look at how the parliaments are working. You've got both Westminster, less so, well, Westminster's in recess, but the Scottish Parliament, the committees and the Parliament have been sitting, and you've got people, MSPs who are present, and people who are beaming in from a screen from their own homes. It works, but it's not as effective, but this is where we are. And I think that the real the emphasis on the duty is on whoever is leading the team, that they pay just as much attention to those who are at home as they do. Because if you've got 10 people in the office in front of you and 10 joining you by from remote cameras around the country, then you have to make sure that, like we're doing just now, that everybody gets the same opportunity to ask the question. Because if you get line of sight with somebody, it's easier for them to put their hand up and get the question. So, and also just make sure that your communication is simple, consistent, and impossible to misunderstand. And make yourself available is the other thing, is that, if people are concerned, just say, give me a call. Humanity, be human.
I've just got one final one, John, and it's a kind of, yeah. Is around context as well. Is obviously we've seen the local lockdowns in Leicester and in Aberdeen, but obviously things are happening on a macro level. So You know, I see Wilson's on the call and he represents China Britain Business Council. Clearly there are things happening on a global level in China, political things. How much of the local context and the global context do we need to think about as well, John?
Well, the global context, you know, we're all aware of that mainly through news. So you watch what's happening in the world. You know, I'm fascinated to see what the result of this American election is going to be, because that is going to really dictate the direction of the world over the next few years, depending on the outcome of that election. So I think global is going to be of interest to people, but I think COVID has made the local much more important, because you know, even from a kind of local business point of view, you know, there's a hardware shop up the road from us here, and everything we needed when, you know, I was trying to keep myself sane by painting my decking and stuff like that. B&Q had run out, couldn't get any online. This wee shop up the road managed to get it for me. So unless you keep using them though, they're going to go out of business. The restaurant up the road from us has gone out of business, but there's another restaurant is doing well because a lot of people are taking advantage of the eat out to help out. Now, that'll probably end at the end of August, but I think local and using local products, I think it's going to be really important, because people are aware that suddenly, you know, your neighbours, your friends, the people who live around you, if they're struggling and suffering, that has a knock-on effect in communities. And I'm just back from the Western Isles, where, if anything, you know, they've got a strong sense of community anyway, but it's really enhanced by this.
Yeah, thanks, John. And the final question we've got is from Hayley, and she's asking, and this is a good one, what are your thoughts on some of the overuse of common terms like the new normal and unprecedented times? Do we try and avoid using these terminologies?
Right, Hayley, I'm glad. I think I got through that presentation without saying unprecedented, and I don't think I said the new normal. I hate these phrases, but you know, why do they become a cliche? Because it kind of, they're good, handy phrases, and you know, when you hear everybody from the Prime Minister and the First Minister down to, you know, your neighbours saying, "Oh, this is the new normal," well, you know that something has caught the imagination of people, and it encapsulates things, because it's not normal, it is new, but I hate it. I really don't like it, and I try to avoid saying it where possible.
Would agree with that, and that's a great way to end. And if I can just take this opportunity to thank John for his contribution this afternoon. It's been brilliant. You've done it in such a concise, simple kind of way, John. You've stuck to all your principles, and I'm sure you've given us some timely reminders right across the board. I'd also like to thank everybody for coming this afternoon. And what I would say is, if you've got any questions for John or for us at the Chamber, please let us know. I'm sure John would be delighted to hear from you if you've got any issues that you want to talk about from a personal point of view, from a business point of view. So please do get in touch. And some great points there, and I'm sure we can make the slides available if anybody would like those as well. Just keep your eye out on the Chamber website for our webinar series. As I said at the beginning, we've been involved now in managing over 100 webinars, which is very much part of our communication strategy. And I know that we've got some exciting ones coming up, which we're delivering ourselves, but also in partnership with British Chambers of Commerce. So, for instance, I know there is one coming up in just over a week with Andrew Bailey, the Governor of England. So please keep your eyes peeled on the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce website. So thanks again for you, John, for presenting, and certainly the clarity out of chaos and thinking people, having a plan, and keep those stories of recovery. And do keep in touch with us at the Chamber and also with John. And thank you all for attending, and we'll see you soon.